In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Adorable Will, I want to pray these titles, but I am unable to do it. Come and do it with me, and I'll do everything well. Jesus and Mary, I love you and glory to my Creator, one with Luisa, Jesus' beloved, who is given the noble and distinguished office that the divine will had within Jesus' humanity. Luisa, who in her littleness lives in Jesus' arms like a baby, caring about nothing but Jesus alone. Luisa, who never refused any sacrifice that Jesus asked of her. Luisa, who Jesus gave a special mission in his will. Luisa, littlest of all who Jesus found after going around the earth over and over again. Luisa, whose littleness Jesus liked and who he chose. Luisa, who Jesus entrusted to his angels so they might keep her and preserve her littleness. Luisa, the little daughter of her Jesus, the little daughter of his will. Luisa, the soul who gives Jesus the kiss, the love, the adoration of all. Luisa, in who Jesus looks at everyone and gives her as many kisses and as much love as he should be giving to all. Luisa, daughter who lays her will within Jesus' will, and with her acts extends a second heaven over the heads of all. Luisa, through her divine acts, Jesus looks at the acts of the creatures. Luisa, who will force Jesus' eternal volition to descend below the spheres so as to triumph over the evil of the human will. Luisa, who together with Jesus assails the creatures with his volition and with his love and confuses them so they cannot resist them. Luisa, whose acts in the divine will wage war with creatures with weapons of love, giving them gifts, graces, and peace. Luisa, whose acts in the divine will carry the creative power within themselves and will be the new salvation of man. Jesus and Mary, I glorify you and I praise you, one with Luisa, whose acts in the divine will descend from heaven and bring all goods upon the earth. Luisa, whose acts in the divine will bring the new era and the triumph over human iniquity. Luisa, faithful daughter of Jesus' volition. Luisa, who works together with Jesus to acquire the new riches to be given to the creatures. Luisa, the soul who has the power to give life to good and to give death to evil. Luisa, the soul who goes to the past and fills the gaps of God's glory. Luisa, the soul who gives Jesus the most beautiful reparations and gives him love for all. Luisa, the soul who in the divine will spreads herself in the present, extends to future centuries, and gives to Jesus that which creation owes him. Luisa, the soul in whom Jesus feels the echo of his power, of his love, of his sanctity, the echo of her acts in his acts. Luisa, the soul who runs everywhere, before Jesus, behind Jesus, and even inside of Jesus, and whose will is wherever Jesus' will is. Luisa, the soul who as Jesus' acts multiply, hers multiply too. Luisa, the soul whose things harmonize with Jesus' things. Luisa, the soul who Jesus is with on earth, and she is with Jesus in heaven, one the interest, one the life, one the will. Luisa, the soul who is the new heaven. Luisa, the soul who is the new sun. Luisa, the soul who is the new earth, all flowery, even more varied with beauty and enchantment. Luisa, Jesus' beloved daughter. Luisa, the soul who is able to give Jesus rest. Luisa, whose will is nothing but the outpouring of Jesus's. Luisa, whose thoughts are the outpouring of Jesus's intelligence. Luisa, whose heart is the outpouring of Jesus's heart. Luisa, who does everything Jesus wants and does. Luisa, Jesus' beloved daughter. Luisa, to whom Jesus gave the teachings about his will that he was to give to all. Luisa, the soul who flows in the immense sea of the redeeming work, diffuses and expands herself in them, such as to surpass the work of creation. Luisa, the soul living in the Fiat, is the greatest miracle that Jesus' omnipotence can perform. Luisa, the soul whose heartbeat, word, thought, motion, breath are those of the living God within her. Luisa, the soul who conceals heaven and earth within herself. Luisa, the soul whose heartbeat, word, thought, motion, breath are those of the living God within her. Luisa, the soul in whom Jesus remains as the center of her life. Luisa, Jesus' beloved daughter, birth from his will. Luisa, the soul who is center of Jesus' will. Luisa, the soul in whom Jesus finds his life, where he will stop and dwell forever. Luisa, whose life is the Fiat. Luisa, like a noble queen carrying the Fiat Creator in her womb, walks through the field of life upon the wings of the Fiat, sowing everywhere the seeds of God's will, forming many other centers of his life upon earth. Luisa, daughter of Jesus' will, who his volition fills. Luisa, one who is center of everything. Luisa, one who lives as circumfused within Jesus' own center. Jesus and Mary, I praise you and I thank you, one with Luisa, the soul who is more than sun, who is light, heat, and fecundity of all goods. Luisa, one who like sun excels over all, triumphs, and conquers everything. Luisa, one who touches everything and becomes life of everything. Luisa, one who is intangible, who no one can touch, who lives up high where no one can reach her. Luisa, the soul who is the reflection of everyone and everything. Luisa, the soul who runs to give life to everything. Luisa, the soul who receives the reflection of all creation. Luisa, the soul who harmonizes with all things created by God. Luisa, the soul who gives to all. Luisa, the soul who is friend and sister with all and receives love and glory from all. Luisa, the soul who is inseparable from Jesus and does whatever Jesus does. Luisa, the soul who is queen. Luisa, the soul who receives Jesus' life. Luisa, the soul who receives Jesus' beauty, sweetness, fecundity, goodness, sanctity, his divine qualities. Luisa, the soul who, if she could be seen by other creatures, she would form their paradise on earth. Luisa, the soul who is Jesus' reflector, his true image. Luisa, like water which holds the first place among all goods. Luisa, whose will dissolved within Jesus' will have its primacy in all things both in heaven and on earth. Luisa, whose whole being the smile of heaven caresses. Luisa, whose whole being the contentment of the blessed caresses. Luisa, whose whole being the peace of the saints caresses. Luisa, who delivers to divine will as many children for as many works and acts of love she emits. Luisa, Jesus' daughter, daughter of his will. Luisa, who Jesus is custodian of and keeps sheltered in his own arms. Luisa, the soul in whom there are repeated fiats. Luisa, the soul in whom Jesus extends new heavens of love, glory, light, adoration, knowledge. Luisa, the soul who contains the variety of heavens, that the whole of heaven, the saints, the angels cannot remove their gaze from. Luisa, the soul who the saints and angels see, the celestial fatherland copied in. Luisa, the soul who the saints and angels see, the multiplicity of new things in. Luisa, the soul who Jesus guards and is extremely jealous of. Luisa, the soul whose one act is worth more than creation itself. Luisa, the soul who gives Jesus the delight of forming new creations. Luisa, the soul whose acts are the manifestation of the life of Jesus' will. Luisa, the soul whose acts are the manifestation of the prodigies of Jesus' volition. Luisa, the soul whose acts are the manifestation of Jesus' repeated fiat. Luisa, daughter of Jesus' will. Luisa, who has lived as queen in Jesus' will. Luisa, chosen by Jesus in a special way to live in the height of the divine will. Jesus and Mary, I thank you and I esteem you, one with Luisa, who redoubles Jesus' contentments and his feasts. Luisa, inseparable daughter of Jesus' will. Luisa, faithful bearer of the goods of the divine will. Luisa, first link of union with Jesus' will. Luisa, first link of communication with the other creatures. Luisa, dearest daughter of Jesus' will. Luisa, who Jesus raised in the sea of his will. Luisa, fortunate one. Luisa, who Jesus called and gave the place of honor between himself and John the Apostle, constituting her the little secretary of his will. Luisa, in whose heart Jesus opens a little fountain of his words. Luisa, who in writing Jesus' words opens the channels which can serve all those who would like to quench their thirst. Luisa, the soul who adapts herself to the divine way, drinking seas of the truths and taking flight toward heaven in the twinkling of an eye. Luisa, who Jesus manifested great things to about his will. Luisa, beloved daughter of Jesus' volition, who his will inundates like sun. Luisa, who is nothing but the prey of Jesus' volition. Luisa, who is the amusement of Jesus' volition. Luisa, who is the contentment of Jesus' volition. Luisa, who the divine will pours upon like solar rays, the fragrances of Jesus' sanctity, power, wisdom, goodness, etc. Luisa, who comes to absorb within her Jesus' immutability and impassivity. Luisa, who eternity spins around that she may take part in everything and nothing may escape her, so the divine will remains honored and fully glorified in her. Luisa, first daughter of Jesus' will, who lacks nothing. Luisa, the first beginning of the sanctity of living in the divine will. Luisa, daughter of Jesus' will, in whose interior flows peacefully the immense sea of his will. Luisa, whose beginning was the sea of Jesus' passion. Luisa opens the channels of truths for the good of her brothers. Luisa, in whom Jesus established the center of his will. Luisa, in whom Jesus' humanity had its stable dwelling. Luisa, in whom Jesus' humanity gave the life of its will like the soul to the body. Luisa, Jesus' beloved prisoner. Luisa, prisoner in bed, only for love of Jesus. Luisa, to whom Jesus said, "Blessed are you, and all generations will call you blessed." Luisa, in whom Jesus' arm will make works of power. Luisa, who will be the divine reflection and filling the whole earth will make Jesus receive from all generations that glory which they deny to him. Luisa, the soul in whom the sanctity of Jesus existed, exists, and will exist. Luisa, the soul who lives up high like the sun, but whose light descends to the lowest bottom and extends to all. Luisa, the first, like solar ray, to come out from the center of Jesus' sanctity without ever detaching from it. Luisa, Jesus' daughter, Jesus' ray. Luisa, who in entering the divine will repeats Jesus' life, multiplies it, and gives new life to his love. Jesus and Mary, I esteem you and I honor you, one with Luisa, little daughter of Jesus' will. Luisa, first link of justice. Luisa, who Jesus leaned his left arm on that she might sustain justice together with him. Luisa, the soul who Jesus recognizes his portrait in. Luisa, the soul who Jesus recognizes his noble features in. Luisa, the soul in whom Jesus feels his own breath. Luisa, the soul in whom Jesus feels his voice. Luisa, whose acts are daylight for Jesus. Luisa, one who can give Jesus everything and defends him from every one. Luisa, who was to rise over everything so as to lay at the feet of Jesus' throne the glory, honor, love, which the others have not given him. Luisa, creature conceived like all the other children of men, takes the third place at Jesus' side. Luisa, who Jesus called from all eternity, when nothing else existed, to live in full accord with the triune God's will and give them divine glory and love for all. Luisa, who Jesus longed for, caressed, and the torrents which were poured on his mama inundated her. Luisa, in whose acts Jesus' life, his will, and all his love flew in. Luisa, Jesus' second support after his mama. Luisa, the one who possesses life. Luisa, the one able to sustain the author of life. Luisa, in whom Jesus centralized the purpose of the glory as if his will were whole in everyone. Luisa, from whom will come the squad of the other creatures. Luisa, in whom there was no break between her will and Jesus' will. Luisa, whose acts Jesus guarded, making his will flow immediately, as if to its place of honor. Luisa, whose living in the divine will surpasses even the miracle of the Eucharist. Luisa, the soul who is the boat that crosses the sea of the divine will with so much grace. Luisa, the boat who runs, dives, and finds herself at the beginning. Luisa, the boat who the sphere of eternity enwraps, keeping her at one single point. Luisa, the boat who is immutable with Jesus. Luisa, the soul, the boat, who came out of an eternal point, and there she remains. Luisa, the boat whose acts run like solar light, going everywhere and to every place. Luisa, the little daughter of Jesus' will, who together with Jesus runs and remains still. Luisa, who imitates her Creator well. Luisa, who becomes similar to Jesus. Luisa, the little daughter of Jesus' will. Luisa, chosen as the link of connection from which the sanctity of living in Jesus' will was to have its beginning. Luisa, the soul Jesus chose, in whom to establish his first dwelling, and in whom to found the kingdom of his will. Luisa, daughter of Jesus' will. Luisa, whose family is the Trinity. Luisa, whose heart the three divine persons took possession of and formed their perpetual residence in it. Luisa, whose intelligence, heart, and all of herself the three divine persons took the reins of. Jesus and Mary, I honor you and I cherish you, one with Luisa, whose will was animated by an eternal will. Luisa, daughter of Jesus' volition, who makes more new acts come out of his volition, who gives Jesus the field for new works, new love, and new power. Luisa, one who gives Jesus the free field to act. Luisa, one who Jesus loves so much and surrounds each of her acts with so much grace, dignity, decorum. Luisa, who calls Jesus' children together with him. Luisa, one who possesses the divine will and can give Jesus everything. Luisa, the little daughter of Jesus' will, who was the first after the celestial Mama, who Jesus called with his tears to be close to him in the manger, to pour himself out in love. Luisa, so little as to surpass Jesus' dear Mama in littleness, and so Jesus could keep her near him in the manger and pour his tears into her heart. Luisa, who Jesus sealed his will in with his tears and constituted her legitimate daughter of his will. Luisa, all that Jesus' will did in creation came back as whole within her. Luisa, who Jesus could see from eternity, and in her he could see his little family that would live in his will. Luisa, the soul who is the closest to Jesus. Luisa, the soul who is the first among all to receive the fruits and the effects that Jesus' humanity contains. Luisa, the soul who comes to reflect herself in the mirror of Jesus' divinity and receives the divine features that bind her to the divinity. Luisa, the soul in who the divine persons find their own physiognomy and recognize her as one from their family. Luisa, who the divine persons give a place in their midst and admit her to their secrets. Luisa, little image of the divine persons inundated with all that eternity contains. Luisa, who reflects herself in the divine persons while the eternal waves continue in her. Luisa, one who compensates the divine persons for the failure of the purpose of creation. Luisa, one who places in force the proceeds of God's creation. Luisa, who leaves all generations behind, and as though first to be created by the divine persons, places herself in order according to the purpose that they created man. Luisa, whose will and the divine person's will are one. Luisa, one who the divine persons love so much as to surpass all the love for all the other creatures together. Luisa, one who has rendered decorum, honor, glory, regime, and life to God's will. Luisa, little daughter of Jesus' will, who the divine persons give everything to. Luisa, whose thoughts will be the outpouring of Jesus' wisdom. Luisa, whose gazes will be the outpouring of Jesus' light. Luisa, whose breath, heartbeat, action will be preceded by Jesus' outpourings first, and then will have life. Luisa, the Queen Mama's daughter. Luisa, daughter of Jesus' volition. Luisa rebuilds Jesus' will, binds it once again, and gives back to it all the relations that the creature had broken. Luisa, who rises so high as to leave everyone behind. Luisa, who places herself in order between Jesus and her. Luisa, who gives herself back to the origin and places all broken relations in force. Luisa, all created things form her cortege, recognizing her as their legitimate daughter, feeling honored to be dominated by her. Luisa, who all nature remains reverent around.
You have reached the end of Day 9 of the Titles of Luisa. Fiat.